Welcome back to another episode, Joe DeVito's podcast. Your host, Joe DeVito. Um, so I had a really amazing conversation with one of my good buddies from college yesterday, and I wish I would have gone it, on an actual podcast, but I just want to break it down. And I think this is fairly important because it made me realize a lot of not just similarities, but a lot of red flags in today's society with my generation being Gen Z, not so much millennials, but Gen Z. And so I was on the phone for this with my buddy of mine for about an hour, hour and a quarter. And of course, you all know that's fairly long conversation to have on the phone when you're actually talking about beneficial material, informational things. And it was more of a catch up, because we haven't spoken in a while. But long story short, this buddy of mine works for a tech company, out in California where we both live. This company did not do so well after earnings. Long story short, the stock dropped about 30% uh, after reports that had weak guidance, profits slash revenue dropped substantially. And so there's a lot of concerns now whether or not that this company will be able to sustain its revenue that it once lived off of and created and just honestly was able to brag about. But what's more important now is that, in this type of market, when it comes to consumer demand and consistency, you have to meet up to the qualitative, aspects of what consumers want. Do you have quality services and products that are able to going to meet up to that expectation of the consumers on a quarterly basis? It's not even by year anymore. It's like literally on a quarterly basis. Whenever quarterly earnings come out, it's like it's constant bump, 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 bump. And we've seen a lot of these companies getting slammed, left and right during earnings because, their profits have fallen, revenue expectations or earnings per share, for example. And a lot of the trend that I'm seeing is weak guidance. But when I was on the phone with my buddy of mine, he had a lot of questions and he's a fairly smart individual, a computer science major, and I have a lot of respect for this guy. But whenever someone asks me, an honest question, and if it comes to, investing or maybe real estate, which I have honestly minimal knowledge on, even though I have my real estate license, you just basically learn from what you learn in the book, and that's the rest is hands on. I don't usually judge people if they don't understand something about stocks, finance, investments. Obviously, you all know that I don't give advice, financial advice. It's honestly just recommendations at the end of the day. But what's most important is that, to me, is that my friend was trusting that he could ask me these questions without being judged, knowing that I would give him, my time, my valuable time, to try to answer it to the best of my abilities. But one of his questions was, hey, he asked, where do you think this market is going in the next year or two? Because he's very, not bearish or bullish, but he's just very nervous on where the market could turn. And I realized, the more I talked to this, into this subject, I realized how dead wrong I was, in my own mentality of how the market, has been playing out the way it is. Because I don't want to say I've been living in a bubble, but maybe I've been living in slight delusion that the market is going to keep sustaining itself, on maybe an upwards, bull run, if that's the case by the end of the year or ending into the end of 2024, for example, which is the end of the election year next year. But I realized a lot of people out there, aside from me, are having a lot of financial struggles. And if they're not having financial struggles, they're having other struggles, whether it's trying to build their career, whether it's trying to, get their life into order. So there's a lot of hurdles that people in my age group, which I'm 25, have to overcome every single day, every single waking moment. And I want to say we all deal with our own struggles. And, I don't want to compare myself to my parents, because I feel like our parents had it probably tenfold in terms of difficulty harder than we have it because our parents truly, came from hard times and they created easy times for us. They've provided for us, which is very noble in their sense, in that sense. Um, but I would say that, it's always good to ask questions when it comes to, finance or stocks if you're unsure. Try to talk to someone who maybe has a little bit more experience. But one of the questions my buddy asked me was, where should I invest my money? I said, that's a good question. Recommendations, right? Of course, recommendations. Can't really tell you where to put your money. Anyways, what I recommended was, what I've seen the biggest return on, so far this year, with one of my portfolios being up over 100%. A lot of tech stocks, for example, they've continued to outperform over time. They've continued to outperform the S&P 500, and techs make up, a hefty percentage of the S&P 500. So you can invest in either, and you'll most likely do well. But most importantly, a lot of people don't have the risk tolerance, that I have. On a scale 1 to 10, I have basically like a 9.5 risk tolerance, because I used to play options. I used to see heavy swings, in the thousands, in the 10,000s, in terms of dollar amount. And luckily, when I stopped playing options, I finished off in the green. I wouldn't say I was unscathed, but it made me realize that the market can be extremely brutal. Not only can it be brutal, it basically, you're at the mercy of the market most times, unless you can try to figure out, like, a calculated, guess to figure out where the market's going to move. And those calculated guesses that do pay off tend to pay off either well or extremely well, as we've seen with a lot of different types of trades out there. But again, getting back to my buddy, so he asked me, where should I put my money? I said I would recommend not putting it in real estate investment trust. A lot of people give me slack for that, because people think that real estate investment trusts are a super safe investment. When you look at real estate, like ticker symbol O, realty income, commercial real estate, that type of thing, its stock is obviously down in the last 3 to 4 years since COVID started. And although it pays an extremely high dividend, if I'm not mistaken, it's like a 5 or 6% dividend. Even adjusted with inflation, that dividend is not outperforming inflation. And with the sell-off on the chart, it's not really doing so well, to begin with. So I would say people are just trying to, average their dollar cost, hoping it's going to go back up. But the thing is, until the rates change, in my opinion, and that sort of thing, I don't think real estate stocks are going to be doing fairly well until then. That's just my honest opinion. And now I've been seeing quite a lot of people online, like Twitter and other social media platforms, talking about how they've sold most of their stake in realty income and other real estate stocks that pay a abnormally high dividend, because those dividends a lot of times are, enticing investors to invest into them, because they don't have that much more substance, to offer. And the other, what would I call it? The other real estate stock that I invest in, other than, those, I don't touch those, would be Berkshire. Obviously not Class A shares. Can't buy 500, $500,000 share. I buy Class B shares, and they're in the $340, $350 range. And I think they offer a lot of substance. Berkshire's been around since like the beginning of time. It's outperformed. It's on par with certain even growth stocks. I don't care about the fact that they don't pay a dividend, because their growth makes up for it. That's why it has great growth. And there's a lot of other factors as to why I invest into Berkshire, like heavy cash pile, good fundamentals, fantastic leadership. And you see their branches everywhere, and they're solving a problem. They're solving, the insecurity of like people not owning a home. Okay, I want to own a home. And then you see Berkshire Hathaway like everywhere, selling land, houses, properties, whatever, you name it. But my buddy asked me all this, made me realize, like, wow, have I been a little delusional? Like, have I been, investing super aggressive to the point where, if you really think about it, am I really putting a lot of my, investment strategies in a position that could really put my whole net worth at stake? And I really want to clarify that, net worth, which a couple of people have asked me about this on Twitter. I don't really care about net worth. It doesn't really concern me. I don't think that it's, something that should be public knowledge. And I don't want to throw all my cards out there. I like to keep a little bit of like ambiguity. But people do know that, well into the six figures, because, as my YouTube channel suggests, at one point when I started my, my videos, I started like around 30,000. In a span of 7 to 8 months, I pushed all the way to $100,000 through the hard work of investing. And, market growth played a huge role in that as well. It saved me a lot of, extra months of investing. And then I started over because I realized it's really easy to get complacent. But besides the fact, so my buddy asked me these questions about where to invest his money. I recommended, hey, I wouldn't recommend real estate investment trust, but if you're looking at real estate and you obviously don't want to buy a property because mortgage rates are extremely expensive right now, I would highly recommend, maybe looking at a keyword recommend, looking at Berkshire Hathaway, it hasn't really done me wrong at all. Or you could look at ETFs that are diversified. I think that's where a lot of people usually go if they're very uncertain and have nowhere else to look at. Um, I have a few ETF picks that pay a low dividend, but they're like growth ETFs, and they've outperformed substantially, during COVID, and even during the sell-offs, they have rebounded fairly strong. And then a few other individual stocks with which offer decent dividends, and they also have decent market growth. But I wouldn't put a high percentage of my investment into those individual stocks because even year to date, some of them are slightly in the red. Whereas tech stocks, a lot of them, hey, 20-30%, or you look at Nvidia and Meta, they're well into like the 180% to like 250% plus year to date. So when people ask me, why do you invest in these tech stocks? It's very risky. Bottom line, the way I look at it is, I don't look at a multi billionaire and go, what'd you invest in? He doesn't say, realty income. He says, I've had Berkshire Hathaway since the very beginning, or I've had Tesla, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, whatever you want to call it, since the very beginning. Got in early, had stock options, maybe bought a lot of stock, and then those stocks have splitted, had substantial market growth, and that multiplier just kept growing so fast past your average dollar cost or dollar cost average, whatever you want to call it. And now you're sitting on so much money. It's like, what do you do with all of it? So that's a reason as to why, and I don't like to talk about this a whole lot, but reason as to why, like, when I look at all my investments, I would say about, man, I would say about 5% of my total investment is in ETFs. And that's a shocker for a lot of people because a lot of people think like, whoa, like it's kind of the other way around for me, right? 95% are in ETFs, 5%, or maybe, 70% ETFs, 30% individual stocks, whatever. And then maybe some percentage in like bonds and treasury bills. But I don't really believe in bonds and treasury bills or CDs. I think that's very old school. And I'm a believer in, maintaining the money, but having growth on top of it. If you want to maintain your money, I don't personally believe in putting it into a savings account or a checking account where you're making minimal, percentage from the bank. Well, they get to utilize your money in your account to go invest how they want it. I believe in, if you want to sustain your money, you can put your money in a CD, a treasury bill, whatever, it pays 5%, but that's just to sustain it. Basically it's locked in there. It's basically guaranteed. But the thing is, it's not going to keep up with inflation, given how much inflation has risen in the last couple of years. One point is well over, if I'm not mistaken, 8%. And how do you find a stock that can pay an 8% dividend? If it does pay an 8% dividend, that's probably a red flag. Also, why would you not just invest into a stock that has growth well over 8%? Because if you just have cash, you're not only losing purchasing power of the dollar every single year when the dollar becomes devalued, but you're also losing opportunity to invest into a stock that can outperform inflation and keep you making money on top of the money that you currently have, right? Makes sense. But a lot of people are weary. So I want to say that I've pretty much, probably convinced my buddy, my good friend of mine, of what I recommend doing, because I assume he has a substantial amount of money that he's kept dry, as we call it, keeping the powder dry, and sending him, a couple of recommendations. Basically, has indicated that there is a lot of, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there. So I would say in general, I think we are due for a bull run in 2024 because it's election year, and I'm hoping whoever gets elected will allow us the prosperity, of being on a bull run. And I'm just hoping that there'll be enough, voter confidence and confidence in the citizens of this country to vote for the right person. I'm not trying to get political here, but I'm hoping for the right person. Um, and in the end, people say it doesn't come down to money, but pretty much it does come down to money because money runs this world, and money can buy you opportunities, and it can buy you a lot of things and happiness, forms of happiness. But I would like to say, what? I think I was dead wrong, especially when I think about other people I assume are doing well out there. They're actually stuck in a rut. They don't know what they're doing. And this is why I share these ideas, because hopefully it inspires maybe one person, at least one person, to say, maybe I'm going to just get off the couch and go invest and not keep all my money in, a checking account. Because I do have friends out there who, a couple years ago, And I don't want to say I should take, all the fame for changing their lives, but they had the money to begin with. And I said, hey, I don't recommend you keep all that money in your checking account. Quick story. I had a buddy who had an inheritance, and it was like well into the six figures. He had no idea what to do with it. And at the time, I'm playing stock options, I'm not day trading, whatever. I think that's silly unless you really know what you're doing. But I was investing, stock options, this and that. And he goes, I don't know what to do with this. I said, I think I am the wrong guy to answer that question. You should go to a financial advisor or, maybe like a money manager. And he goes, yeah, but like I see what you post online and I believe, you can help me. I said, but I only post what I want you to see, which is what most people do. Long story short, he said, I have an aggressive, appetite for the market. I don't mind if there's swings. I said, well, I'm not going to help you play, stock options. And long story short, he invested it into individual tech stocks and then the remaining into ETFs, to help, of course, maintain money in case maintain equity in the case that market did start to sell off. And a lot of these tech stocks did extremely well. And he basically turned that six figures into a couple, like what you call like a couple bagger, where you make a couple hundred times your money, like 100%, 200%, 300% your money, to the point where he was sitting well into like the couple hundred six figure, like the well into like the low six figure team, you know whatever you want to call it. And he basically liquidated X amount, and then he ended up putting a large majority of that, after figuring out how much you would have to pay in taxes, which is very important to know as well, into real estate. And then the remaining amount he left into ETFs, and then a smaller percentage in individual stocks. So he kind of like reversed it in a sense when individual stocks started to take a beating. And so now he lives in a house that he basically has paid off, which is amazing. And by the way, he does not live in California. This is out of state, of course, because you would never buy a house in California for like 200,000 to 300,000. And basically has his house basically paid off. He put majority down. He works a good solid job. And what's most satisfying for me is the fact that um, he not only listened to me but took my recommendation, but the fact that he had the confidence to hold the stocks when they sold off and they came back even stronger. And he took those stocks and he said, okay, fine, like I'm out, like this is a little bit too much for me. He thought he had, an aggressive appetite, but in reality, he realized that it was near aggressive, but he almost, folded a few times. But I'm glad my buddy's doing well. Not to drag on the story here, but just to wrap everything up, of course. I think my buddy has an idea now, the one I spoke with over the phone, where to put his money. He had a lot of questions about taxes. But I realized, hey, a lot of people are just kind of saving up their cash right now. And it kind of surprised me because, in the Twitter community, a lot of us are just like constantly buying, constantly buying. And I feel like, we're going to do extremely well because when the market turns around in a bull run, we are already going to have our foundation built, while a lot of other people have just been saving up money, which is losing purchasing power, and it's not really competing with inflation whatsoever. So it really makes you wonder, are you making the right decision by keeping all that money in your checking account, whether it's $1,000, $10,000, $100,000, or would you rather have it invested, meeting up with market growth, having dividends reinvested, this sort of thing. And plus, the fact that I get to share these ideas on Twitter just makes me very satisfied because it inspires people to invest, and it helps me connect with like-minded individuals, who get to give me, quality, feedback on basically ideas and anything whatsoever. Constructive criticism, I call it. So other than that, hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. This was a really good talk for me and my buddy, and I'm really hoping you took some form of value from it because I do think we are due for a bull run in 2024. It's going to be a volatile year with the election, but I'm hoping if we make the right decisions as a country, we can come out of this, on top if we already have our ducks in line and our powder dry. So other than that, hope you guys enjoyed. I'm your host, Joe of DeVito Podcast, and I will talk to you guys next time. As always, invest wisely and take care.